good day, and welcome to Timber Talk. Timber Talk, of course, brought to you each and every week at this time on this radio station as a service of Reynolds Forestry Consulting, and your host with his 12-point on his phone, Mr. Teddy Reynolds. You got that nice deer over there.
Yes, that deer was chased by two blue ticks, Boomer and Zeus. Zeus is my dog, and we were up hunting with Jim May. Some folks know him as Cooter May up there in Delight, Arkansas on his 2,000 acres. And Boomer and Zeus jumped up a 12-point, ran it past Bob, a childhood friend of Jim, who he lets hunt on his property that he has up there. And Jim shot it at full run with the two blue ticks right on his tail, about 20 steps behind the deer, and shot it open sights with a 30-30.
Wow.
In full swing. And, man, it's scored 154 points on the Boone and Crockett. Main beams were like 22-inch. And but what's amazing is that 12-point. 12 points, yes. That's a lot of points to
sure is
see at one time. And our guest today is Jenny and Alan Nipper. Jenny, Alan, nice to have y'all both on Timber Talk.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Good morning.
And today our topic is family communication and intergenerational transfer of timberland. And, of course, Alan and Jenny have 3 children who are very involved in the management and the decision and the communication that takes place in their timberland. And they have an 8-step process that each family should walk through. And even better, if you ever happen to be in or around or able to travel to one of the workshops that Alan and Jenny put on. They've done over a dozen workshops from Texas all the way to Alabama. And these shops are about 3 hours in length. And they walk you through all the steps that are important for you as a family, children, parents to walk through, as well as goals and assessments. And we're going to walk through those 8 steps today. If you tune out of this show before the end, you can always go to timbertalk.com, listen to this show in its entirety, as well as any other past shows. And a little bit of background on Alan and Jenny, a quick bio. Alan and Jenny are forest landowners in central and north Louisiana, as well as in southwest Arkansas, and reside in Homer, Louisiana. They're actively involved in the routine management of their land and timber, and have experienced numerous issues with transfer of inherited forest lands. After attending several training seminars on intergenerational transfer of forest lands, they realized many of the issues they, as well as other landowners, encountered could have been prevented with effective family communication via family meetings. Family meetings with the Nippers' 3 children are now a routine part of the management of their properties. These personal experiences led the Nippers to work with other landowners on how to organize and conduct forest landowner family meetings. They make presentations to family and landowner groups with the goal of providing examples, illustrations, and exercises to make family meetings successful and the transfer of family forest lands to the next generation as smooth and enjoyable as possible. In addition, after the presentations, they provide an opportunity for participants to informally view their family meeting and management records. Alan and Jenny are members of the Louisiana and Arkansas Forestry Associations, Forest Landowners Association, American Tree Farm System, and Louisiana-Arkansas Farm Bureaus. If you would, jumping into the show, Jenny, where did your interest in this topic come from?
Well, about 15 years ago, we realized after we had attended some meetings that we did not have control of our family timber resources for the future. So we started attending meetings and talking to other people and learning. And then our fathers passed away, and everything was on us. My father never told myself or my siblings what he wanted us to do with his timberlands. So we had to find out most of all of the information on our own. We had to make decisions not knowing what my father's plans and goals had been, and not knowing his intent at what he wanted us to create. So that was some hardships among myself and my siblings when we had to make these decisions.
And Teddy, my family was almost the opposite of Jenny's. We knew what my dad had told us all along what he wanted us to do. The biggest problem was I was too lazy or didn't care enough or didn't have time or whatever, and I never wrote anything down. And then after he passed away, along with like Jenny's dad, we lost a lot more than just losing our parents, our fathers in that case. We lost all the information that they had because we didn't have any records. And then we decided, well, we weren't going to do that to our own kids.
And that makes it a double loss.
That's right.
It doesn't have
to
be
a double
that
loss.
way.
That's right. And so that from that, then we, as Jenny said, then we started going to these different meetings, trying to pick up on how we could to accomplish that with our own family.
Jenny, what have been some of the greatest successes that you have seen as y'all have gone around teaching, sharing, and also inside your family, if you'd like to include?
Well, we had one meeting, and a lady invited her son to come to it, and he was a college student, and he was very bored. But later on that night, we met them at dinner and started talking more, and then a year later, the mother told me that she talked to her daughter and said her son and her daughter need to start talking about the family land. And the daughter said, "We've already started that. We're thinking about inviting you to come join our meeting." So Deborah was really excited about that, and that made us feel good because something had come of our meetings. And then another person in North Louisiana, a very successful businessman, has been to 3 of our meetings, and every time he's come, he said he's learned something to take back to his family, and he really appreciates us having these meetings. And one of my goals is to get more women involved. I didn't know that much about forestry when we started doing this, and the women need to start learning about the business and what the husband wants done, and just to know about your land and what needs to be done. So I encourage all women to go to as many meetings. I've been to several, and every time you learn something, and just to keep hearing it repeated helps, because learning about basal timber and all that, I didn't know any of that.
And y'all have 8 steps in your workshops that you go through, and I'd like to quickly walk through those. We're about 7 minutes into the show, so that should give us plenty of time. And if we would, and Alan and Jenny, y'all just kind of chip in. And Alan, if you'll just take the lead and kick off with a little bit of an introduction, kind of where you talk about some of the recent surveys that indicate only 40% of the U.S. landowners have discussed their land. Mention some of those things and then start with step 1.
Yeah, one of the things that we found out that really surprised us is that there are just a lot of folks that do not pass on the information, just like our dads didn't. And when you start looking at those numbers, and I think the number is about 40% that have not been involved, and then even past that, there's a smaller percentage that don't get involved in the details and the management plans. And so when you start factoring all that in, then there's just very few people that are intimately involved with their families, their land. And so I'm talking about the children or the heirs
with the timberland.
With the timberland. And let me say too that we talk about this from the standpoint of timberland because that's been our experiences, but these concepts fit folks that own radio stations or shoe stores or any kind of business. Because it's the same concept. It's just that we talk about it from the standpoint in our meetings of forestry land because that's what we've been involved in.
And timberlands differ from the stock market in that even though it has its own equity considered as an asset class, but it's a knowledge-based investment, so passing that knowledge on to the next generation is extremely crucial in the success of the future return.
And you're right, and the other reason is because it's long-term.
That's right.
A lot of other businesses you can get in and out of a little bit quicker, but just because of the nature of the way trees grow, it typically is a longer-term business. And so what we try to get people to think about is that all this has to be done before the parents, the folks that own the land now that will give it to the heirs, before they pass away. They have to establish their goals. And it really means that both husband and wife have to sit down and come up with their own goals, independent of each other.
And that is step 1.
That's step 1. and then merge those goals into basically the family business plans, what it's going to amount to. And
so the parents talk about their goals as far as their timberland in relationship to how they want to manage, how they want it to yield, as well as the relationship and involvement with the children. And then you get the children's goals, and then you merge all those goals together, but that's at the parents' discretion, to a family goal system.
Well, what we usually do is have the parents come up with their goals, and that we have a form that we use that we try to work with them on, and they struggle a little bit because most people think of goals as being short term, that I want to sell those trees or whatever. We try to get them to think from the standpoint, as Jenny said, getting the women involved in it long term. What's the long term commitment in the family? That is usually pretty well fixed. Then when you involve the children, then the children will come up with their own goals, and we've seen it in our own children. Initially, they started thinking more about, well, we want to sell trees or whatever the case might be. But those start to change the more you do it, and they start to look at more long-term goals. So I don't know where you ever really merge the parents' goals and the children. It's probably that the children keep
so they go from wanting to pick fruit to realizing that they need to tend the tree, and if they do that right, there's plenty of fruit from that day forward.
That's right. They're looking at the long-range business aspects of it. So that's one of the first things, or is the first thing that you have to do, is go through and look at the goals.
Number two.
Yeah, number two then is you need to do what we call a self-assessment. The form we use is a form that we call I think, I feel type assessment. And it really tries to get at how the family, again the parents and then the children, because they need to be involved in it too, what value they put on a piece of property. You know, is it a family heirloom, or is it just strictly an investment? And I'll get Jenny to tell you a little bit about a rental property that we had and our son. You know, Jenny and I had a little bit of a disagreement on when we did our self-assessment on this rental property, but we were relatively high in our scale. But then I'll let her tell you what our son said.
Our son said that after his dad passed away, that he was going to bulldoze that rental property. And he said, why are you going to do that? And he said, plant more trees. So that made Daddy feel better.
So in a sense, I could kind of understand where he was coming from, and that he was starting to think long term, but it really changed my perspective of what his perspective was, because I didn't think that he was thinking that way. As I said, Jenny and I rated it up kind of high on our scale, and he rated it down all the way at the bottom.
And like you said here also, you might have two tracts of timberland, and you might be viewing them very different, because one of them might have been the old original home place for your grandparents or your parents, and so it has a little bit of sentiment that's a little bit extra and beyond another timberland tract that you might have acquired later as a pure investment.
And you could have a sibling that lives on the tract. Naturally, that tract's going to be more important to him than some sibling that's off somewhere and not very familiar with and not interested in the tract.
And then also you mentioned that there might be other cash assets in the family, and of course how you would evaluate a cash asset has a lot less sentiment than how you would evaluate the home place that's come down through the generations.
And it all gets involved in, just like we were talking about a while ago, the potential liquidity of those assets, stock market versus trees and land, and all that's involved in it. Number three. Third thing is just to start to establish some effective communication. It basically means that somebody's got to take the leadership to sit down and have a meeting and go through and try to decide what needs to be talked about at those meetings and develop it from a long-term perspective. You have to think about, do children, do heirs get to the point that they get too involved? And because, again, in Jenny's and I's case, we want to continue to be involved in it and use it for our purposes, but at the same time we want our children to be involved in it. So you have to be careful that you don't let them get too involved, that they start to feel like that they have control over it, or they get to the point to where they're
because usually this is like an LLC or a family limited partnership, and the parents, even though they might be gifting shares to children from the estate tax planning situation, you are still in control of everything that takes place. And you don't, and I think that's a hesitancy on a lot of parents to involve their children, because they're afraid that the children will become too pushy and it'll become controversial.
That's exactly right, and we don't get involved in trying to recommend to people where it's an LLC or a limited partnership or whatever. That's between the individuals and their lawyers, tax folks, whatever. But by sitting down, having the communication, then that starts to set the stage for we're all working towards this common goal, and how do we get there? Is it an LLC, limited partnership, whatever the case may be, and working with folks.
Alan, before we continue, and Jenny, a quick word from Weyerhaeuser.
At Weyerhaeuser, we're over 100 years old. 60 years ago, we started North America's first tree farm. 30 years ago, we developed high-yield forestry to help grow more on the land. And this year, like every year, we're planting over 100 million seedlings to provide wood and paper products later this century. Because when you've been growing as long as we have, you like to think ahead 100 years or so. Weyerhaeuser, the future is growing.
And for those of you who just might have tuned in, we're visiting with Alan and Jenny Nipper. We're talking about family communication and intergenerational transfers in relationship to timberland, management, ownership. And if you didn't catch this show in its entirety, you can always go to timbertalk.com, listen to this show as well as any other past shows, whether you didn't catch it in the beginning or tune out before the end. Once again, Alan, Jenny, nice to be here, that you're here with us. We're going through the 8 steps, and the first was goals, and then second was self-assessment. Now we're talking about communication, and I think we were just wrapping that up, and you were moving into involvement.
Involvement's the 4th step, and this is really where parents need to work real hard to try to find how their kids can be involved so that you get them interested. And we go through and use our family as examples of different things that we've done, but without getting into those details, every child has something that they could accomplish in a family type business.
And what they can contribute.
What they can contribute, where it be involved in putting a web page together. They don't actually have to be out on the ground in a forestry situation.
Or whether it's the accounting or the alleging or computer skills,
whatever.
All the way to inventorying timber, to reviewing files, painting boundary lines.
That's right. It takes the parents to sit back and decide what could be done in that case, and then try to use those to involve them. Getting my example a while ago, if you have an individual that's way off somewhere from where the timberland's located, computer skills might be the best thing that they can be involved in, and then that would allow them to still have a feel for it and be contributing to the family business.
And if you have family members that are extremely involved in current careers, then at that point in time, at least they can be involved in the assessing of the information and the decision-making process that moves forward through time.
That's right. I like to use, what kind of footprints have they left on the land, and if they feel like they've got good solid footprints on that land, then it's going to mean something to them down through the years.
The more familiar, the more endeared.
That's right.
Step number, is there anything else on the involvement side?
No, I don't think we.
Okay, let's shift over to organization. And Jenny, of course, as Alan walks through here, you chip in any way you want to.
I guess I'd ask Jenny just to say a little bit about how often we have our meetings, and that kind of sets the stage for the next step, which was organization.
We try to have our meetings at least once a year. Sometimes we'll have it twice a year, but we just go to one of our houses or go somewhere where we're not interrupted with the cell phone or the house phone or friends coming over, and then we just sit down. We have agenda made up, and we try to limit it to maybe an hour or 2 hours.
And this agenda is pre-sent out to everybody, to where everyone, it's kind of like our city council meetings, where everybody knows what the agenda is, and it's sent out to them. They know when the meeting time is, and it's a formal meeting. Do you chair the meeting, Alan, and then you co-chair, Jenny?
Typically, that's how we have done it. We won't get to the point to where our kids start to get a little more familiar with it and comfortable that they could handle it. We think we're getting there, so we don't.
They each have different things that they do, and they have to report on their jobs that they have.
It's kind of like each one has their own committee,
right?
And then they report.
They report back to tell everybody what they've done, and how things are going.
So that everyone is familiar with what everyone else is doing. The key thing, Jenny said the agenda, but probably more importantly is that agenda then leads to having minutes that are made, and then those minutes are kept in a file. Everybody gets a copy of them, and then we have a master file, because hopefully then they can go back and look at those minutes 10 years from now and say, this is what we all decided to do.
And I also noticed that you mentioned here that, of course, when you schedule your meetings, some of the children could potentially get creative and kind of perhaps influence their parents to plan the next meeting at some exotic resort in the Caribbean or something. Then you'll have 100% attendance and participation. And don't forget to invite your forester for his presentation too.
and that is a good point. That, you know, these meetings should involve your advisors, whether they're foresters, CPAs, or whatever. There are going to be times when you need to have those folks involved, and so that is a part of it.
You also have ground rules.
Yeah, the ground rules are probably the real hard thing to establish, and ground rules set the stage from this point on. And I'll just give you some examples. We kind of call it a Bill of Rights, Family Bill of Rights, and right off the bat we told our kids, and I guess I would suggest that anybody else think about it. There is no guarantee in the Constitution for an inheritance. You know, that is what the parents have established. If they want to give it to their kids, that's their decision.
Excellent.
And so I think that just depends on everybody's situation. Our goal is
that means treat me right all the way to the end.
I guess our goal is to leave what we can to our kids, but at the same time they realize
if you need it before then,
that's right.
Then that's where it's going to be used.
That's right, and they know that we're going. You know, if something happens to me, I expect them to take care of Jenny, and so those are the things. Now there are a lot of other ground rules
and I like the ones on voting. You only let blood kin vote.
That's right.
But then each vote means they represent their whole family.
They represent their whole family,
equal.
but in-laws can take part in the discussions. We picked up on that from working with other folks, because typically, and we've seen it in our own family, typically in-laws tend to be misunderstood.
Yes.
You know, their contributions, if they have a vote, a lot of times the others just don't feel like that, and the in-laws may be right, but the others just do not feel like that they had the same interests that the family did. So the easiest thing to do is say you can participate, but your vote is through your spouse.
And then the blood kin are the ones who vote, but of course their vote also represents their whole family. So
that's right.
in a way, the in-laws are very well represented.
They are represented.
Basically, one vote per family.
That's what it comes down to. Yeah, it comes down to one vote per family, and so the in-laws vote may be diluted out if you want to think about it. You want to think about it that way. The other thing I would say too is, as people start to think about organizing these meetings, with the electronic age, you can do meetings and not have to be face to face. You need face to face meetings, but as Jenny said, maybe face-to-face meeting once a year, but if you had to do something over the internet, a teleconference, whatever, that's right.
Too. So it's a lot of flexibility.
A lot of flexibility.
Don't necessarily have to travel 500 miles
that's right.
to all meet in the same spot. You can do it.
That's right. Especially if it's something that has to be done real quick. Some decision has to be made quick.
And in the essence of time, we still got 3 more to go. If you'll start off with topics number 6.
Well, topics could be anything. I guess we tend to think a lot of things are important from a history standpoint, knowing the history of the land, the management. All of we keep journals every day. We record information in it, and so that provides the information that hopefully our family can use down the road. Other topics could be just management topics. They could be topics that would relate to silvicultural things,
fertilization and so forth. Is that worth the additional return and expense?
And I think there needs to be a time for some of the old family stories to come out too, because again that helps develop the legacy. I've seen in our kids that we've given them those stories, and they're now starting to talk about those, and so I think that ties them back to the operations.
Stories that involve passion, vision, goal setting, attitudes.
anything
management,
like
silviculture, return rates. You're saying all are as important as the other.
All of those are important. You just have to find time to talk about those. The seventh step that we try to get everybody to think about is, what are your expectations from these meetings? And typically the children are not going to talk a lot and be involved a lot in the first few meetings, but then as they get more familiar with it, they'll come around and start to participate. Whoever's leading the meeting, again, typically the parents have to have high expectations to be able to control the meetings and to think about the meetings. A lot of families have elephants in a closet, and all of a sudden an elephant may jump out at you, and so you have to expect those things and be ready to deal with those.
So number one, recognizing the expectations and then developing those expectations to where they're realistic are both crucially important.
Those are both real important. I guess the other thing is, and maybe this goes back to one of the other topics too, but at first the parents probably have to tell the kids that your expectation is not going to be to have a whole lot of vote in this, because again, as we said, it's the parents' resources at this point in time, and so the kids sort of go along implied consent. That's their vote for the first few years.
So their vote is an implied consent. It's not necessarily a mandation by any point.
That's right. Not really a mandation. And then I guess the last thing that we try to get folks to think about is to evaluate your meeting. After your meeting.
This is point number 8.
This is
the last
point
of the 8. We've been through the other 7. Continue on.
It is develop some type of questionnaire, survey, whatever, that when the meeting is over with, everyone can fill out and say, this was our expectation for this meeting, this is what we thought we would accomplish, and did we accomplish that? And I think you'll be surprised. As the moderator leader, you may think, yeah, I got over what I wanted to get over, but then you may realize, no, they didn't understand this. And then that tells you, okay, we've got to come back to that topic next time. Or you may find out that, hey, everybody already knew this before we got started, so we took 15 minutes.
So they'll evaluate everything from where the meeting took place, the location, as well as the content and the information.
It could be those things, and those are important, but probably more important are the actual, not the organizational type things, but actually the subject matter.
And what was accomplished.
Did everybody learn what they wanted to learn?
And do you have, like, suggestions of what the next meeting should cover as far as topics as well to be included?
And I mentioned it one time, Teddy, we've got forms that we use in our meetings that cover most of these topics, that are templates that we give people to take home, and they can fill them out.
We've got less than 2 minutes in the show. If somebody wants to attend one of your next workshops, bring their family to go through this process, how can they get hold of you?
They can go to Nipper Management Services, and that's
Jenny at NipperManagement.com.
Yeah, our email is
Jenny at Nipper Management, and that's NIPPER, Nipper Family Management?
No, just Nipper Management.
NipperManagement.com. And you also have a website, NipperManagement.com?
.com, that's right.
Okay, so they can visit that site if they want to get the email.
And it has some examples of the things we've done, little clips, a couple clips on some of our meetings.
And what we will also do is we'll have all that information, contact, as well as the show on timbertalk.com. And folks can go there, listen to the show, as well as get information to contact and get back with you. I guarantee you there'll be some listeners out there who will attend some of your workshops in the future.
We'd love to have them.
Well, thank you, Alan, and thank you, Jenny. And David's over here giving me the last couple of seconds signal, 30 seconds. And once again, we appreciate the involvement, and we encourage you as family members to involve your family as judiciously as possible and prudently. And, of course, that makes the intergenerational transfer that takes place later to be very successful.